Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest, absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey, y'all. Welcome to this week's show. The series we've been doing on identifying herbs in the wild by their plant families and how to use them has been very popular, and I'm really glad about that because I think it's really important to be able to identify plants in the wild, especially in what we would consider an emergency situation. You're not always going to be able to have all the herbs you need on hand, either dried and put away for storage or in tincture form. It's kind of interesting to me, really. I mean, I'm on certain social media platforms, and I'm always on the Grow Network. I'm a moderator of the forums, as I always say in the intro. So I talk with a lot of herbalists. Actually, I have a really big network of herbalists that I talk with. One's a professional group as well, and it's kind of interesting to me that when someone asks a question, they'll say, "Okay, I've got such and such going on. What would you suggest?" And this is usually, one herbalist talking to another. Sometimes it's even a clinical herbalist that says, I have a client and I'm just running out of ideas. Can anybody suggest, something? And then other times it can be someone that got onto one of those forums who is there that has, a family illness going on and they're just looking for more information. So, of course, we always say, look, we can't say anything to diagnose or treat any condition. We're not practicing medicine without a license here. But you can look it up and our suggestions, and maybe you'll find something that works for you. Well, I would say 95% at least of the other herbalists, the professional herbalists that are on these forums, when someone asks a question, they'll say, get this tincture of this herb or this formula made from these herbs. They'll usually recommend a brand name and they'll give specific doses, so many drops or a dropper full once an hour or 4 times a day. And, I don't ever approach things that way. One, because I'm not a clinical herbalist. Okay. I don't have 30 years experience dealing with all sorts of people's medical issues. That's not something I even want to do. I'm more what I would consider a kitchen herbalist. That's really the model I grew up learning. The mountain people that I learned from primarily, they didn't keep a bunch of tinctures around. They didn't keep a bunch of formulas around. They would have certain dried herbs that they collected throughout the year to make a tincture, usually to make a tea. But that's because, you dig roots in the fall. If it was spring, you would want that root on hand, right? Or say you get in the spring, you go out and get your poplar buds or your cherry bark. And if it's winter, you want to have that on hand. So many of our herbs, like, oh, gosh, the camomiles that we talked about last week, they're flowering in the summer. The goldenrod is flowering right now. You want that in the winter, so you have to put it in a preserved form. Well, I think a lot of people kind of have this mindset of to be an herbalist, you either have to have your own herbal apothecary of all these pre-made tinctures made very specifically so you know exact doses, or you have to buy something someone else has made. And a lot of people are far more comfortable buying something someone else has made. We're kind of been trained from a very young age by commercials and commercialized shopping to look for that brand. We rely on that brand. We trust that brand. So the thoughts of going out in the woods and picking a plant and making something for yourself, very foreign to a lot of people, even most herbalists, believe it or not. I mean, this really kind of surprised me because, like I said, my tradition is okay, got a health issue. I either have something dried on hand in storage, or I just walk outside and pick something, or go to the woods. I don't think there's ever been a single time when I had an illness or someone in my immediate family had an illness that was treatable with herbs. That's, a definition you need to make because not all illnesses, the primary treatment should be herbs, obviously. For some illnesses, the primary treatment is, traditional Western medicine. But for what can be treated at home with herbs, I can't think of a single instance where I couldn't walk outside and find at least one plant that was useful for that condition. So that's the way I approach herbalism. That's what I want to encourage you to do. When someone asks one of those questions on one of those forums, my advice is usually very different than most of the people that answer because I don't know this person. I mean, I don't know how tall they are, how heavy they are, if they're male or female, what their ethnic background is. I'm not going to say take, 4 drops of this tincture once an hour because my dosage that would be very generic may not fit that person. The herb I might recommend for that person may not fit their own personal energetic, so to speak. You know, um, well, the two examples we always give, that Michael Moore wrote about, and now I think all herbalists pretty much echo this, is, the guy who had bad eczema, and so Moore gives him a liver stimulating herb. It got worse. He then gave him a liver soothing herb. I think it was two, dandelion and burdock. He got better. That guy's personal energetics were very different than another person that would walk in from the same condition. Another one would be like licorice. Licorice is such a great herb for lungs, virus, kidneys, all that. If you are of a certain body type, what they call the anabolic body type, it can cause your blood pressure to rise. It can actually kind of cause you to retain fluids and cause your blood pressure to rise. For most other people that are not of that body type, it won't. So I'm not going to, obviously not going to sit there on a forum online and answer someone's question in generic terms because I don't know who I'm talking about. I don't know who I'm talking with. The first thing I normally do is ask them, when did this begin? Were you going through any life changes? Were you under stress? Had you recently moved? What is your environment? So I start out with questions like that, and then I kind of help the person figure out the root cause. I just throw out a few suggestions. Like I said, I'm not a clinical person, but I ask the questions that help them figure out the root cause of what's going on. And then we discuss some herbs. I'll give 5 or 6 suggestions. I'll say, what's growing in your local area that you might be able to use? But that's just the way my mind works because that's the way I grew up as herbal medicine, not in a clinical setting, not with an apothecary, so to speak, but kitchen medicine. And by that, I mean medicine made in someone's kitchen for the condition at hand. Uh, why is this important? Well, in an emergency, or we could go down that road of, what if the bleep hits the fan, like people like to say, and you couldn't get to a doctor, you couldn't get to a pharmacist, or you couldn't order something and have it delivered overnight or in a couple of days. How in the world would you get what you need? Well, I experienced an emergency like this just this past weekend. You listened to my last week's podcast, you might have noticed I sounded a little tired, and that's because I was in extreme pain and wasn't hadn't slept well the night before. Okay, yeah, I did something dumb as usual. I was helping out my mother with some yard work, and there was something very heavy that I was dragging. And the easiest way to hurt your back is to both lift and twist your spine at the same, lift something with your hands, especially holding it out far from your body, and twist your spine at the same time. That's a real good way to herniate or blow out a disc. I did that many years ago, and I try not to do it again, but for some reason, I was dumb enough to do the same motion with about 200 pounds, and I sprained my back. That's the only way to say it. I mean, it wasn't just a strain. I mean, at the time, I didn't really feel it. I came in, sat down, ate lunch. 15 minutes later, I stood up and collapsed. I mean, back into the chair, could not walk, could not move. Sheer agony. And all I had on hand was aspirin because I'm away from home. Aspirin and some bourbon. So that's how I tried to treat it the first day. Hot and cold, aspirin and bourbon, and that didn't work out real well. So the next day, I started thinking, okay, what is around me that I can use? There was some valerian capsules, just basically ground up valerian root in a capsule. That helped that first night. It gave me a little bit of sleep. I needed the pain to stop so I could at least do my podcast and get back to work writing. So the first thing I thought is I need an antispasmodic. What around me is an antispasmodic? And so I'm out there looking and I see a plant that I recognize as horse nettle. And that plant looked to me, and I looked at it, I thought, the leaf looks a lot like bittersweet. It also kind of looks like Jimson weed. Those are antispasmodics. And I remember Culpeper writing in the 1600s that he would take Jimson weed, and I think bittersweet as well, anything in that Solanaceae datura type family, and make a foot bath of it. And he said it was good for nerve pain. Well, hey, it's worth a try, right? I double checked, I don't do things recklessly. I found that, yeah, horse nettle is an antispasmodic, very poisonous if taken in large doses internally, but a lot of traditional Native American use for um, pain, for asthma, even the spasms of the lungs in very small doses, and for poison ivy rash. And I thought, well, if it's antispasmodic and it's good for pain, and it even, if for intense itching, that means it's going to work on the nerves a little bit. Let's give this a try. So I went out, and boy, that is one prickly plant. I had forgotten the leaves, the stems, everything's covered in thorns. I picked one that had some of the little tomato-like fruits on it, brought it in, boiled it, and added that to a hot foot bath. Put my feet in there, and within about 5 minutes, the feeling in my feet was sort of like if you've ever been to the beach on a really hot day and you're walking in the hot sand and you've been swimming a little bit, you sit down in the sun and everything just kind of relaxes in this like warm, totally chilled out, feeling. That's how my feet felt. And that feeling gradually came up my legs, and sciatic pain that was just killing me gradually receded. So that was emergency medicine. It was not enough. Um, I did not feel comfortable taking a full bath in it, not having used this plant. I still needed something for pain and muscle relaxation. And about a year ago, I was doing some research and I ran across an herb that really no one talks about. There is like nothing written on this plant in modern or ancient herbal literature, but I got a couple suggestions. One said that it was relaxing, and another said it might be good for pain. And these were just like little anecdotes I picked up from people. And so I got some seeds, and I had started growing some out, uh, you know, down here where I was injured, because it's a very hot and different environment than where I live in the mountains, and it seems to like this environment a little bit more in pots. I'm actually just growing it out in 3-gallon buckets. Coleus. Coleus is an ornamental sage. It has the most wildly colored leaves. And I think at some point someone looked at those leaves and thought, well, that must be a psychedelic plant. So the little bit of literature you will read on it Basically says it's a plant you could smoke to get you high, but um, other research I did said that's a total myth and that's bunk. You know, I can tell you one thing: you eat about 5 or 6 of those leaves, just pick them off the plant and eat them. Or this is at least what I did. This is what works for me. Within 30 minutes, my muscles relaxed and the pain went away. I mean, the pain went down from like, let's say we're at a scale of 1 to 100, and I'm sitting there at 100, it back down to about 20. So, if I moved or turned, yeah, I'd still get sharp pain. But to just lie there on the couch, flat on my back, pain went away. To sit in a chair so I could actually do my podcast that week, pain went away. This is the most effective muscle relaxer and pain killing herb I have ever found. And it seems to have no side effects. There are no hallucinations, so just get that out of your mind. There are no visual, lights or trails or anything. There's no feeling of intoxication. There's a feeling of relaxation, and there's no hangover the next day. So for the last week, I have been eating Coleus leaves, a handful at a time, the tops of the plants. In the sage and mint families, you can pick the tops and they get fuller from the bottom, so it actually helps the plant grow if you keep harvesting off the top. And they're bitter, so bitter herbs are generally good for digestion and the liver. Probably a lot better than drinking a lot of alcohol when you're in pain. And I can't find any side effects. I mean, no side effects whatsoever that I have observed thus far. Now, that doesn't mean with long-term use there wouldn't be, and I'm not advising anyone to use this herb. But if you do use Coleus, which, like I said, is also a beautiful house plant, so why wouldn't you have some around? Please tell me your results. It may be that I'm, if not the first herbalist, the only herbalist I can find who have found this use for this plant. And if I can document it, this could be an incredible boon, an incredible help to the world. So many people getting hooked on opiate pain medications and prescription muscle relaxers and taking NSAIDs that wreck their stomach or Tylenol that destroys the liver, Aleve or naproxen that can damage nerves. If there's a member of the sage family that's a pretty little plant, and you can grab the tips of it and eat it or add it to a salad, and it takes care of the pain, that could be revolutionary. So I'm just saying, if you have experience with this herb, let me know. But that's another example of, in that situation, I walked out, I looked around, and my knowledge of plants gave me options that other people wouldn't have. If I had been, well, one, I don't think there actually is a health food store. Maybe in the next town, it would have been, quite a drive. And I'm not going to name it because I literally called there one time when I was visiting and said, I need to buy some sage, sifted sage. And they're, what is that? We don't have that. Okay. I thought, well, maybe they don't carry culinary herb. So another time I was in town and I needed some skullcap, and they had no idea what I was talking about either. Uh, you probably have the tincture on the shelf, but the people that work there have no idea what they're doing, and I gave up on that store. Um, but I could have maybe ordered from Amazon and had it the next day, or around here it would have been a couple of days. But I would have been laying there in extreme pain. I could have done what most people would have done. Go to the emergency room. Let me tell you, I was talking with a neighbor down here about a week ago. Their son has MS. He was in town and he was visiting, lives out in another state. And while he was here, he appeared to suffer a stroke. I mean, this is serious, right? They went in, got him in the car, took him up to the emergency room. I think his wife drove him actually. And this is one of the major medical centers in this entire state. I mean, I won't name it, but when you think North Carolina, what do you think of as the primary um, medical center and hospital? The number one, the one that's supposed to be the absolute best, the one that's supposed to have international reputation for outstanding care. All right, you got it in your head? If not, just do a quick Google search, you'll figure it out, right? Use DuckDuckGo, it's a better source, by the way. Um, he sat in the emergency room with one side of his body numb and his face doing strange things, giving every evidence of having a stroke, having a pre-existing condition of MS, so he couldn't stand. He sat there for 16 hours before he saw a doctor. So, now let me tell you what happened next. He goes in and they say, well, we don't think it's a stroke. We think it's Bell's palsy. Okay, going home. He goes home and passes out as they're driving back. They rush him to the hospital again. That doctor says, oh, yeah, I think you've had a stroke. You're lucky you didn't die between here and there. Let's bring you in for further evaluation. Turns out it was neither of the two, it was Lyme disease. So after two emergency situations, he gets home to his home out west and finds out he has Lyme disease. So, yeah, I have just hurt my back to the point I can't stand up straight or walk, and I'm in agonizing pain, and my back's in total spasm. Do you really think I'm going to go to the emergency room for 16 hours and wait to see a doctor? Been through that before years ago, and I won't do that again. So that's how identifying these plants can help you out in any situation. Okay. I told you before about the time I split my leg open. It was bleeding. I couldn't get it to stop. Even within 24 hours, every time I stood up, it would start bleeding again. I looked around. What do I have at hand? Oh, there's a pine tree. Let's see if I can get some pine pitch. Put the pine pitch on there, stop the bleeding, disinfected the wound, prevented an infection. I'll give you another little anecdote. Years ago, I am out on a trail just hiking. It's just a little hike, you know. I didn't expect to go that far. I didn't have a pack with me. I didn't have anything. It's spring. It was a little soggy. It was still cold. It might have been getting up to the upper 40s. And I'm just out there just enjoying, you know, getting out of the house from being cooped up all winter. Slip on a wet rock, fell down and a steep embankment into an icy cold rushing river. Got myself out. Basically a miracle. I made it back up the uh, the hill, the ravine, whatever you want to call it, and get up there. And I'm soaking wet. I'm beaten up. I'm bruised, and um, basically could have experienced hypothermia. I knew if I kept moving, I could probably. It was like 2 miles out, maybe three. I figured if I kept moving, that wouldn't be an issue. Likely going to go into shock because I had just been through that trauma and everything. But one thing I could feel happening right away was an asthma attack. Who knows why, but such changes in temperature, cold, stress, if you have to run real fast, if you have asthma, it can trigger an attack. And I'm out there in the woods, 2, 3 miles from my vehicle, which was another 5 or 6 miles from town once I got to the vehicle, with no inhaler and no emergency antihistamines, nothing. So I'm out there and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Am I going to make it back? All I can do is start walking. And right by the trail, uh, small, I guess it was in a nice warm spot because it had grown faster. It was the only plant I saw, almost miraculous, probably a miracle, lobelia plant, a wild lobelia plant. And I looked at it and I just said a prayer to thank God that I had exactly what I needed right in front of me. Grabbed the plant. I'm used to taking lobelia. Lobelia in a large dose will cause nausea. It's a little like tobacco in its effect. You know, if you ever had strong tobacco, or if you're not used to tobacco, it'll make you sick, you know. So I didn't even think about dosing. I just picked the plant up and I ate the top of it. And I started walking. Lobelia is a bronchodilator and it also helps prevent shock, physical shock. It's a pretty neat plant. It can also help give you a little energy and help you put a little pep in your step, a little like tobacco in its effect that way. It helps with concentration, helps with a lot of things. It was right there beside the trail. Now, if I was an herbalist that relied only on store-bought tinctures or store-bought teas, and I'm in no way am I disparaging herbalists. I mean, a lot of herbalists start that way, and then they start growing some herbs, and their herb garden becomes their source. But for a lot of people, thought of going into the wild and picking a wild plant is very intimidating, and it's perfectly understandable. It's perfectly reasonable. I mean, in our society, we're so cut off from nature, and that's why it was such an incredible blessing for me to grow up with the old mountain folks and the old German folks and people who had that idea of both kitchen medicine and that herbs were something in nature. A lot of Native American folks, I mean, they weren't going to the store and they may grow some things in the garden, but most of what they used was in the woods. So that mindset I got has helped me a lot. And I think if you're taking care of yourself, if you're taking care of a family, you know, with conditions you look at regularly, maybe make a list of herbs that are possible, may possibly help. You may come up with 10 or 15 herbs for one little thing. And then just look at what grows in your area and learn to identify those plants, learn to harvest them, learn to make your own teas and tinctures and decoctions and oils and everything you can make from an herb. You don't have to do it all at once. Don't let it be overwhelming. I always say when people want to learn to identify wild plants, I say start in your backyard. You know, you can use oh, there are plenty of apps. There are plenty of websites. I don't think anything's a good substitute for a field guide, a good field guide. But just look in your backyard. Learn to identify plants. It's absolutely amazing. I've heard other herbalists that do things this way talk about it. Doc Jones, for instance. When the need is there, you walk outside and suddenly you see the plant that will help you. I mean, that to me is just an incredible sign of divine providence. I believe that's the way things are supposed to be. And it's really only our lack of knowledge and experience that is the barrier between us and the ability to do that. So hopefully with this series that I've been working on, going through the plant families, I'm going to give you those tools and make you more comfortable. And, you know, beyond that, there's absolutely no substitute for experience. You have to get out there and start collecting the plants and using the plants. And next year, as the old folks used to say, if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise, I'm going to begin offering in-person instructions. I'm going to begin offering herb walks. I want to do them in the mountains and in other regions around the southeast. You know, I've lived all over the South. I'm used to the swamps, the coast, the sand hills, the hardwood forests, and the Piedmont and everything. So maybe at least I can figure it out in North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and I'll announce these on my show. So if you're in the area and I'm happen to be doing one pre-planned, I mean, I'm not going to allow drop in, you know what I mean? But, you know, you can sign up online and go out on a plant walk with me. You know, in the mountains where I live, you're going to find a medicinal plant probably every 6 inches. In other areas like the sand hills, whether it's a lot of pine barrens, we might have to walk a long way, but we'll probably find a couple of dozen medicinal plants that would be useful for just about anything you needed if you were living in that area. You know, I'm going to do some more formal lessons and such, you know, in a classroom setting as well. But, you know, I'm excited about that. And so between now and then, if, you know, if you keep listening to my podcast, learning about the plant families, you'll be really well prepared to come get as much as possible out of in-person instruction. So I'm really looking forward to meeting everybody. I've had so many people say, I want to come learn from you in person. Um, you know, I don't have a facility, I don't have a school I can use, but I'm figuring out ways where we could, you know, meet on a sunny afternoon or maybe at a local library or something. And I could, you know, I could give this presentation or I could give some instruction on anything from how to make tinctures or, you know, how to process plants, how to identify the herbs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, as always, it'd be a question and answer session. You can ask me anything you want to know. And between now and then, hey, go ahead and ask me anything you want to know. I mean, I love interacting with my audience. My audience are my friends. I love answering your questions. So, y'all have a great week. Oh, and you may be able to tell I'm completely pain free now. So, a week of using Coleus and not overexerting and stretching and everything. Oh, I use some of Father Nape's cold water treatments. After taking a hot shower, I then take a cold bath. Believe it or not, that helps a lot. And a lot of prayer and hard work. And my back's 95, 99% back to normal. So, you know, this stuff does work, believe it or not. All right, y'all. Have a great week and just you know, enjoy nature. Enjoy and learn and stay curious and ask questions. And that's how you become a good herbalist. And again, no offense to anybody who likes to buy their pre-made tinctures and is very specific and incremental. I think that's a wonderful skill. It's just my tools are kitchen medicine. My tools are not clinical. And I think I'm better able to convey that information than I would be if I tried to talk about things that I don't have experience with. So I think everybody understands that. Y'all have a great week. I'll see you here next time. Have a good one. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.